Namaste. So we continue with volume 8, questions and answers, 1956. So people often ask that when we are born, there are several kinds of struggles we have to experience. So everything is often put on a general category called karma. Karma is like a dumb category. Blame it on karma. But there are many things in creation other than just the law of karma. And the mother speaks of accidents with regard to birth. It's very interesting. And that's because of the state of ignorance. So it's not just about karma, it's the state of ignorance in which creation is wrapped. So she says when a soul wants to take birth, and what it sees, it doesn't see the entire, it's not a trikal drishti that it has all the future in front of it. It sees, generally, it has its own criteria, let's say, it sees like a little point of light where it should go. And it goes, and it's born to a certain parents. But it's not just the baby that the parents form. They form the baby physical body, but they also pass on, transmit many things apart from the genetic heredity factor. They also transmit certain of their habits, tendencies, and many other things the child picks up in the social milieu. There is no way that the child knows that what kind of social milieu that's going to come up. And then as the child develops, he has to struggle against many of these tendencies. So she says that this what she uses the word atavism. So child is born, the soul enters into a family, but then it has to struggle. Struggle against what? Against many things which it has received from its own parents and the social milieu. And it's not an easy thing. Many children that particularly today, these days I see who are experiencing this struggle and they don't understand why. And that's because though something in them has seen, there is a reason why they have chosen a particular family. But they can't see all things and everything. And therefore, there is what can be considered from a practical point of view an accident. So, what is the remedy? Obviously, from the soul point of view, unless it's very developed, extremely, there can't be a easy remedy. But she says parents can engage in a conscious parenting. That means they should form the child and they should be conscious that their thoughts and feelings have an impact upon the child. This is a well-known fact, but the mother speaks of it in a beautiful way. She says, but anyway, what is possible is that instead of doing the thing like an animal driven by instinct or desire, and most of the time without even wanting it, they do it at will with an aspiration, putting themselves in a state of aspiration and almost of prayer, so that the being they are going to form may be one fit to embody a soul which they can call down to incarnate in that form. And then she says, I knew people, not many. This does not often happen. But still, I knew some who chose special circumstances, prepared themselves through special concentration and meditation and aspiration, and sought to bring down into the body they were going to form an exceptional being. Now, this is going to be more and more problematic, as she said, because now more and more developed souls, some souls which have waited for 1,000 years. She speaks of souls which have waited for a very long time, because somewhere they knew that this is going to happen, such an event, a kind of, they were developed, quite developed, and so now is the time they want to enter into the earth atmosphere. So the whole question is, are parents ready? Is the educational system ready? Is the society ready? And of course, as a psychiatrist, I see more and more this kind of phenomena, and very difficult to do much once the child is already growing up, because neither you can leave the parents nor you can try to explain to them that your child is different, he has his own seekings. You can try it, but best is conscious parenting. This is the answer that the mother gives, and now the young generation is possibly moving towards that there should be conscious parenting, and parents should aspire, they should meditate. Childbirth should be more human, not just an animal desire driven, and then you have a child and then we put many desires into the child, both material desires, psychological desires, and obviously the child is a different soul, then it's going to be very difficult because the child is not born for this purpose. And then he has to shake off, and sometimes it involves a lot of struggle, misunderstanding, and confusion. So, this is a very interesting account to read, and not just read, all these things are things to be put into practice. Then she gives something, a very interesting aspect about someone asked the mother. And when we read these sentences, we sometimes feel how rude were some people and how crude was the stuff on which she was working. So she has accepted all kinds of people. Why I say so? Because someone is asking that. Mother says, this is a conversation of 11 July 1956. She says, the last question is from somebody who finds that I have made promises a little lightly and that, after all, I haven't kept my word. So this is the kind of humanity. So don't be too much carried away by, somebody necessarily living in the ashram or living since 50 years, 60 years. The ashram has concentration of all kinds of people. There are some very rare exceptional beings as well as those who have difficulties which we can't imagine, and yet they have been called. There is a reason, there is an occult arrangement so that the Divine Mother and Sri Aurobindo can work even on those difficulties. So here is someone, Mr. X, he is saying, who tells the mother that I have heard that the supermind has descended. You are saying so. But it doesn't seem so. Just imagine that you have not kept the word. What is the word? And then mother says in very, see, these are undertones. What the divine goes through when he is upon earth. She says, perhaps I expected more from humanity than it was capable of giving me. Almost that I don't know. Perhaps it is a purely superficial impression. And then she says that people here, they also didn't know that the supermind has manifested. But then she goes on to say, the question is, but now that person who is perhaps a bit impatient tells me this, why have the difficulties increased for quite a large number of sadhaks? So when you come under the zone of the supramental work, force, it's not like, oh, from today I'll be very fine. The same rain that cleanses, purifies, and it softens the sun rays, is also experienced like a hail, and it can lash out at us. So the supramental force, what it does, it shows to us a mirror which we didn't want to see. So we believe that we are wonderful people. And of course we are always the most wonderful people. And then this force begins to show us the truth. Why? Because it's truth consciousness. And that is something very difficult for us to see. So when he asks, mother says, who told you that it is not because you have become more conscious? That all your difficulties were there before, only you did not know it. It gives you a light, a mirror, in which you can see yourself better than you did before, and you are a little troubled because it is not always very pretty. This is an experience almost everybody goes through. And people get unnerved. They don't know. They say in the beginning, I was able to remember, I could, but now I have doubts, now I have this, now I have that. Because these things were there, but they were not interfering. And suddenly now all these things we are able to see, these subterfuges, these undercurrents. And one has to go through it. There is no other way but to endure the journey with faith. And after some time it gets cleared also. This is also the experience. Like storms, they get cleared. And when they ultimately get cleared, things are cleaner, they are lighter, they are better. But this is the passage. So this we see happening in the world also. That everybody had a very pretty picture about how things are, but we see suddenly things in the world consciousness coming up. Sri Aurobindo spoke of it as the yoga of the world. And not realizing that, well, these things were always there. But now we are able to see it, they are coming to light, they are coming in the open. But earlier they were all kept under wraps in a kind of social order which was more or less mechanical and fixed. So this is one. Second, she says there is yet another reason why difficulties increase. One is that it shows the mirror. Then she says, when the force which is at work is stronger, more insistent, naturally what resists as strongly. And if instead it is here I have to say something that's not very pleasant, now she gives a wonderful solution. She says, yes, these resistances will come. So, what we have to do, what we have to remember, when things which we had never imagined in our nature, they come up. She says, if instead of being hypnotized by your little difficulties, your little inconveniences, your small discomforts, your big defects, big is under inverted, if instead of being hypnotized by all that, you try to see the other side, how much more powerful the force is, the grace more active, the help more tangible. In a word, if you were a little less egoistic and less concentrated on yourselves and had a little wider vision in which you could include things that don't concern you personally, perhaps your view of the problem would change. So basically, that when we have difficulties, problems, challenges of nature, and then as a result, all kinds of other things come up. It's like a package, which means guilt, idea of unfitness, unworthiness. Instead of being more and more dragged into this kind of darkness, we should concentrate on the grace, invoke the grace, and know that there is nothing impossible for the grace. Once again, this is the experience of everybody who goes through the journey. That you face difficulties, they seem unsurmountable. And there are letters of Sri Aurobindo. I mean, I remember when I had read it, I said, really? But when you go through it, you said, yes, really. So the letter is that all can be done by the divine, the heart and nature purified. In fact, he goes on to say that even if a person is riddled with 1,000 difficulties and defects, sex difficulties, anger difficulties, all kinds of difficulties, yet if he continues to have faith in the divine, he will go through. So when you read it, it looks like an amogha astra, amogha var. And actually, when you go through, you see the difficulties come, how they look at some point as if they are going to grip you completely, and then you stay focused on grace, how it's all cleared, they vanish without a trace. When you look back, you wonder where did that old self come from and where it has vanished. So this is the crux of the matter which the mother is reminding us. It's again a very practical thing. And somebody has, and she also says that, well, when there is an intensity of aspiration, when we see the difficulties, some people are filled with joy, some with anguish. Meaning thereby, when they see the difficulties, they discover in their nature things which are not very pretty. They feel a joy that, well, I have discovered something which should not be there, and now is the chance to get rid of it. Whereas some are filled with an anguish. Oh my God, I have this, I have that. Well, our room has been dirty for, who knows, ages. So many impressions of layers and layers of our evolutionary journey are there, and they have to be cleansed. And on one side, it can be very discomforting. It's like when, now I don't know, but in India, old time, the houses where the painting was done almost every year, because we didn't have these kind of new paints, cement paints, base paints, which would last for 10 years. So it used to be simple whitewashing. So it would get dirty. At least I know about my house. So every year before Diwali, you would get the house whitewashed. Before whitewashing, all the things were removed because, the house was in a turmoil. In the sense, nothing, everything is brought out and kept in the middle, covered by a cloth, and then during that period, a day or two it would last. The house will look it's a very uncomfortable place. You can't even stay properly. At night you would make place so that you can stay. But then after that, when you clean everything and put things in place, it looks so much more better, neater, lighter, more beautiful. So the same thing happens here with regard to the yoga. Somebody has asked a question that how to light the psychic fire, and the mother says very simply, you light it by aspiration. Now if there is no aspiration, will for progress. If there is no will for progress, will for perfection. So these are the three things which light up the psychic fire. Another question is, how can we help somebody from a distance? Somebody is not well. So often here mother would advise that You don't need to go physically. In fact, she would say if you go physically, you may be of less help than if you are here. So if you have to help, because you are engaged now in a very different kind of activity. So how do you help somebody who is at a distance? So she says something very beautiful. We get anxious, we get tense. That, oh, we can't go. Oh, what's happening? The person is suffering. And by doing it, we are actually increasing the load of suffering. We begin to suffer with their suffering, and it's not going to lessen their suffering. It is making them suffer, it is making us suffer. And so suffering plus suffering becomes suffering to the power of 2. But there is another way. And that she says that how to use thought. And she says that you can send if you have made a formation with a definite aim, its whole life will tend to the realization of the same. The thoughts are like, they are emerged, they have of course entered, but you are consciously directing them now. So if you consciously direct them toward the person who is suffering, who is in pain or whatever struggling, and you're directing this thought with full goodwill, now this thought is going to reach. Of course, depends on the intensity and the power and the capacity of thought and concentration. Therefore, if you want to help someone at a distance, you have only to formulate very clearly, very precisely and strongly the kind of help you want to give and the result you wish to obtain. They will have its effect. See, there are many people who go to occultists, so-called occultists, there are people who will do some puja. And what happens throughout the puja and the whatever occult, you say you have the faith, now all will be well. So normally you contact the person and say, I have spoken to X, and X has assured me that you'll be fine. So what you have done, first there is faith. So it clears a lot of negative things, makes the person receptive to the grace. Because always it is a grace that will act. And the occultist, while doing all the puja and all, is also directing certain energies, benevolent energy, toward the person. And it helps. But then we can do the same magic. In fact, in a better way. Because when we are connected with a person, then it's no more just an occult process. It's a living, real process. So she says that you can do it by sending your thought formations. Now, what is it that gives strength and persistence to mental formations? It is emotion and will. So very often if you observe carefully, we negate these formations. It may sound very strange. So supposing somebody is not well, somebody is having difficulty, while we are sending thought formation, we are also saying something negative about the person, criticizing the person, like he deserves it. He had this because of this problem. Oh, that person doesn't understand. So what we are doing, we are cutting off our own thoughts, as if we are carrying a sword with which we are, one hand, we are fighting the adversary, on the other hand, we are strengthening the adversary. So when we concentrate, it should be with full love and goodwill. Nothing else should come. How the person is, what that person is, should completely go away. This happens, particularly when there has been a fight within family or with a friend, and you feel, no, I should help. But even as we are helping, there is an undercurrent going. He doesn't really deserve. He deserves this problem. It is his own doing. And because of him, all this. And we are throwing a lot of negative currents. So that we shouldn't do, because that's the least we can do. By doing it, by speaking ill of people, we are actually increasing their burden and the divine's burden upon earth. So the least we can do is to remain quiet. And if we can send thought formation with emotion and will, affection. So what kind of emotion? She says affection, tenderness. Somebody is suffering, so there is tenderness. Love and an intensity of will, a dynamism, it will have a much greater chance of success. This is the first method. Why it doesn't work very often? Because as I said, we are cancelling it. Because that emotion is not there. Thought is there. Or sometimes even negative emotion is there. Because of our experiences with a person, quite likely. But we should generate. And where does affection, tenderness come? It comes from the psychic. It doesn't come from the superficial heart. So we have to bring out that element, and then it can even become a part of yoga. Because we are touching the core, true loves in the psychic. And then she says this is the first method. Second is, after doing this, you offer it at the feet of the grace with your prayer for the intervention. So this is the second part. She says, if one offers it to the grace and puts one trust in it, asks it to intervene and has the faith that it will intervene, then indeed one has a chance of success. Of course, he says that sometimes the grace won't grant it because one has to go through what one has to go through. And then she says something very interesting. Where it becomes bad is when the request is not granted and one revolts. So sometimes it may not be granted in the divine providence for various reasons. And the person has to go through what one has to go through. Still our prayers is supporting the person. We don't realize it. That something is gone. The person may not realize it. He may even curse you because you are not there physically. If a person curses you, he'll close the doors to the help that is reaching from X or Y. But nevertheless, this will serve as a cushion. Surround the person, increase its probabilities of getting well. And yet, sometimes still the help doesn't come or the grace doesn't do the magic as we expect it to do. So this happens because of various reasons. And he says, if one asks with sincerity, a true inner sincerity, there is a great chance that it will be granted. By true inner sincerity means nothing should contradict that, something which is also happy that the person is going through difficulties. All these kind of perverse wills are there within us and one should be very careful. And so she says that, the greatest is to say, let thy will be done. But then she reminds us, you must not think that the divine likes to contradict you. He is not at all keen on doing it. So when we ask something with the simplicity and sincerity of the child, the divine likes to give. He is not a judge sitting there and seeing all the time. And most of the time he does give. He can see better than you what is really good for you. But it is only when it is absolutely indispensable that he opposes your aspiration. Otherwise, it is always ready. He is always ready to give what you ask. So this makes a complete package. And what is simple, wonderful teaching that, if you want to help somebody from a distance, this is how we can help. And she says that the grace is infinite, it can do anything. So this is very interesting and important that from a distance, so we'll often hear all kinds of things, people doing distance healing. And they create a very aura around it. You charge money for it, which is very strange. So you give a phone call and the person will say, okay, I am healing. And after some time, if the person gets well, you thank the person. No, it's not the person. It's the grace. So, yes, a person can add to your prayer and people can pray along with you, and that is something wonderful. If there is a collective prayer, so much the better. But this whole thing turns into a business. What is the person doing? He is sending his thought. And while it's all right, it's a good thing, but he cannot easily send the thought with feeling. He can add will, but he cannot add feeling. And I have had this experience with some people who claimed that with thought I can do things. So he also claimed that, with thought I can scan what is going on inside. So I was in a little jovial mood and he didn't know me. I had just entered and he was doing this magic. So I said, okay, can you do this with me? He said, yes. I said, you can say what I am thinking. He said, okay. So he is so way off the mark because he had never imagined. See, normally you think that the person will think something about himself or oneself. I was not thinking about myself at all. So I said, okay, I am this. So he said, I'll try again. I said, okay, I'll think about the person and you tell me what is the problem. So it's a very funny incident. So he told me that the left side of the brain is not working and the person has this pura whole thing. I was smiling. I didn't know whether I should disclose or not. So he said finally, because normally people go and they are thinking about somebody who is not well, whom you are curing. And people get very impressed because you have not done scan on anything and the person is beginning to say this is the problem, that is the problem. So I told him, actually I was thinking about the mother because I can't think about anybody else. So he was so embarrassed and after that he didn't enter that office. I don't want to take the name. Some people know, would know. He finally left Pondicherry. He had come and people were so much, he can think, he can see. I said, just do a little experiment. Have some common sense. You're just believing whatever anybody is saying. And then you see, this is how we have hordes of people connecting. It happens. This happens. Miracles happen. But there's a process in it. So and the greatest miracle is the miracle of grace. And she says that truly the divine grace is infinite. So we must remember, but at the same time, if it doesn't happen, don't revolt. Just trust that the divine knows better. And yet continue to pray. Don't get disheartened. Your work is to pray. As somebody used to say it jokingly, that about some Delhi University, apply, no reply. Chennai University, today apply, yesterday reply. The reply comes even before that. So it was a nice, communicating, but here with the divine, you apply, your job is to apply. Some people say, will the child get in the ashram school? Should I apply or not? I said, this is not your job. Whether he'll get in the school or not, it's not your job at all. You apply. Who is stopping you? Even if he doesn't get, at least the name has been registered. Somewhere in some register which is kept in the ashram, somewhere in that register the name has gone. And that name and the form is lying. If it doesn't get, doesn't matter. But your name has been registered. Who knows, you will study in the bigger school of the mother, which is in a way a very beautiful school, the world. But now you have registered, you have not been selected in the school, but mother has selected you. Who knows? And you are growing up in the world as if it's an ashram school. I know this with people. I'm saying all this with real experience. So this idea that I won't apply because this may happen, Nishkam Karma, you apply, it's your job to pray. Your job, you should not be lax. No result is coming, doesn't matter, pray. The person is alive, pray. The person has departed, now pray that there should be a smooth journey. Not question and revolt. That's all that one should remember. The grace is infinite and it knows. So with that trust and confidence of a child. So all this she reminds us, and she says this grace is everywhere and one should pray. And this very interesting conversation. And I just want to read just a couple of lines because people talk about Darshan days. What does she say? She says when Sri Aurobindo was here physically, Darshan days carried a special meaning. So what used to happen? There were special descents which were taking place on those days. You see, Sri Aurobindo had that only 4 times a year. Later on, first it was twice, then 3 times, then 4 times. So what was the Darshan day? It was a day when Sri Aurobindo would be, there in the middle, in the front of people, and people would, and that time he would invoke a very special, highest divine force. Now, why he wouldn't do it every day? Every day he is doing it, but for the earth. So, individuals who went past, they came in contact with this special force which was that day invoked, and Sri Aurobindo became the vehicle to hold it because there was no manifestation. The descent was only taking place in Sri Aurobindo and the mother. And the mother was all the time in the middle of people, but Sri Aurobindo only 4 times. That is the story of the Darshan days. So he would call in this special grace, the special force, which is normally not accessible. We may use the word supramental force, and people would go past and they would receive something. And there would be a message. Later on, the mother says something different. She says, now there is an invasion of all kinds of forces on Darshan days, which are more or less dark, who may come with goodwill, possibly, but who come with an almost total ignorance and throw it all out in the atmosphere. One can actually experience it. If you go around with all those balloon wala and chai wala and all kinds of things which are around, it becomes almost like a ritual or a bit of celebration, and celebration like a vital way. Oh, today is Darshan day. How was your Darshan? Very good Darshan. This is not how a Darshan day is, it will be very quiet, receive, give yourself rather. That's it. But every day should be a Darshan day. Sri Aurobindo's own letter is there. Every day should be like a Darshan day. Every time we go to the Samadhi, it should be like a Darshan day. This is what the mother was trying to ingrain in us. And then she says that, nowadays, what is happening is, he says, in the days when Sri Aurobindo used to give darshan, before he gave it, there was always a concentration of certain forces or of a certain realization which he wanted to give to people. And so each darshan marked a stage forward. So people had to write, and only when Mother and Sri Aurobindo accepted, they could come. Meaning thereby not all are ready to receive what he is there to give. So they would call, and there was also a sequence. That's how Darshan Day originally meant. It had nothing to do with wearing very nice dress and a new dress and going, with that, that was not like that. That from morning I am going and sitting in the samadhi, near the samadhi for many hours I am sitting for meditation. None of these things were there. So she says, and so each darshan marked a stage forward. Each time something was added. But that was at a time when the number of visitors were limited, very limited. But this special concentration, now does it not occur? She says, now occurs at other times, not particularly on darshan days. And it occurs much more often on other kinds of occasions, in other circumstances. The movement is much accelerated. So actually, we just don't know. Now we have to be just prepared and ready. Who knows? It'll come, receive it. It's not about darshan days. Any day. You may be caught literally wearing your pants or without it. You are not wearing any special dress. It happens. You get this experience. The descent takes place. Very special. It changes you. So this idea that only on darshan day something special will take place should be replaced by any day, any moment anything special can take place. And so one should be open and receptive. On the other hand, she says on darshan day, generally the atmosphere is, because people come with goodwill, but they're ignorant. They come with all kinds of expectation and they throw things in the atmosphere, not deliberately. And so she says, well, some people may experience joy. That she says that it's something very personal. That's a different matter altogether. And I ought to say that these darshan days, with all this rush of people, serve not so much for an inner progress, that is to say, inside the ashram, as for a diffusion outside. So why we still celebrate? Why we still give the message card? Hopefully, we are supposed to give the message card, and Mother gives the logic of it. The use we make of these days is a little different. Above all, it is to go farther, have a vaster field, reach more distant points. But the concentration is less, and there is this inconvenience of a large crowd, which was always there, but which has been much greater during these last years. I mean, now it's so much more. At the beginning, there was not such a crowd, and perhaps the quality of the crowd was also a little different. So, then the disciple asks, because sometimes people say that Mother did not want to give message, or she does not, this is the other conclusion. But now in Mother's words, so that it's not this person saying or X saying or Y saying. What does Mother say? So the disciple says, but Mother, what is the significance of the message you give every darshan? I may add in today's context, is it just a religious activity? Should we or should we not? Now Mother says something interesting. Is it that only Mother would give the message, then it has a meaning? What does she say? Yes, as I have just told you, this is spread in thousands of copies all over the world. It is an externalization of the thing. It is a way of spreading the influence, spreading the message, reaching farther. Everything that is said in a darshan message has been studied, proved, tested beforehand. So any of those writings you can pick up, which are like eternal messages, and there are plenty and plenty of them. They are fundamental truths. There can be no doubt about it. And that you pick up. And that goes as a message. He says it must spread out. So to restrict darshan messages is almost like saying I don't want the light to spread. Literally it means I want to block it. So, that's one way. Because I am saying what she has written. That's why I am reading it. And on darshan day it is given. First the experiment is made. Because now everything, whatever is written is all that they have experienced, tested and realized. So anything you pick up from their writing, practically. So it spreads. And people wait for it. Then it is declared publicly. The first movement is the individual development. At the darshan time, it is spread abroad. So this is a public movement, and she says, Sri Aurobindo always spoke of two movements: the formation of the individual in order to be able to reach the goal individually, and the preparation of the world. And both of these go together. So the ashram is not just meant for individual sadhana. It has also a role to play in the world movement. And one should understand these two movements, and not that, we are here only to do a individual sadhana and we don't need, and that's not the issue. It also goes. And now even 57, I'll read in volume 9. She also says now the ashram is no more limited to only this place. But let's keep it for another day. So this is important. And she says that people also ask this question when they see somebody has had a problem. Sometimes on a darshan day, somebody has heart attack or somebody has an injury. So people start experiencing fear. Oh, why? Why this has happened? So she says, here she says, just one second. So many people doubt the effectiveness of the protection, the safety of the path, because others go astray. And in their egoism, they tremble with fear. Instead of telling themselves what I have just been reading to you this evening, what is the cause of all catastrophes, small or great, which threaten those who follow the path of yoga without having taken the necessary care to be sufficiently pure and sincere? If I am unconscious, I may fall. Simple thing. I'm talking of a physical accident. To be more conscious. If I am just throwing away energy in all kinds of activities, things may happen. And then I can't blame the grace and the protection. Still it comes. If you look at it, really it's amazing. But she says, no purification, no protection, no grace can save those who refuse the indispensable purification. But what is that purification she is speaking of? And I would add this, that fear is an impurity, one of the greatest impurities, something which we saw during the time of Corona. It's the greatest impurity, and it grips people, and people think it's a very wise thing we are doing. It's very practical. They even quote Mother and Sri Aurobindo. One of those which come most directly from the anti-divine forces which want to destroy the divine action on earth. And the first duty of those who really want to do yoga is to eliminate from their consciousness with all the might, all the sincerity, all the endurance of which they are capable, even the shadow of a fear. I have shared this experience that Chutnarayanji once told. Mother says, if you have fear, you cannot do yoga. Then the fear ran away. Then she realized, my God. Having all kinds of experiences, not very happy ones. Some days you will see Rakshasa coming, trying to suck blood. These experiences come. Heart attack. So, he keeps telling the mother, and mother says nothing, but the Rakshasas continue. So one day he said, Mother, I am very afraid. If you are afraid, he said, now I don't know what to do. But then the fear left, and with that the Rakshasas left. There were no other but the fear which was taking the form of Rakshasas. So you see, it is like this. And he says, to walk on the path, one must be dauntless and never indulge in that petty, small, feeble, nasty shrinking back upon oneself, which is fear. Why are we afraid? Because we are saying, oh, mera kya hoga? What will happen to me? What will happen to me? Grace will decide. We should do what we are meant to do. Rest is up to grace. Whatever and this is true in all mystic lore. You see, when Lakshmana is hit by the Shaktivan, imagine getting up and said, Bhaiya, I thought you are God. Imagine, or people around telling, Rama, I think we are mistaken. We thought you are God. But your own brother, you can't. That's how Ravan interprets. See, he couldn't save even his brother. Look at him. That's how Garud also interprets when he see both of them in Nagpash. But there was a reason for it, which later on is disclosed. So fear and yoga don't go together. One should be ready and willing. Whatever is going to come will come. It's okay. Not that one should anticipate troubles. Open to grace, do whatever little we have to do from our side, and walk with an indomitable courage, a perfect sincerity and a sincere self-giving, so that one does not calculate or bargain does not give with the idea of receiving, does not trust with the idea of being protected, does not have a faith which asks for proofs. It is this that is indispensable in order to walk on the path. And it is this alone which can truly shelter you from all danger. How beautiful she says. So then, of course, she reminds us that this is a path where one has to have a balance. It's not a path of extremes. Some people, take to that, I'll meditate for many hours, and people also get very impressed. She says, have a balance. Several places she has spoken of it, and balance is indispensable. The middle path, and when you are in difficulty, she says, widen the consciousness. Don't get narrowly focused. I have this problem. Whatever we give attention to, that is going to increase. So if we give too much attention to the problem will increase. Instead of that, widen. It's a fraction, it's a small thing, it'll pass away. It's come at this point of time, it'll pass away. But let me focus on the eternal, the permanent, the true. That's going to stay with me, that's my aspiration. All events, circumstances will come, situations will come and pass away. But let me not lose the link of this for which I have come. So this is what she reminds us. And there are several very interesting passages on the effect of the supermind. And she says that if the consciousness is developed, she had told thousands of years, so people were very, those who may have heard. So there also it happened. When she said, wait for thousands of years, then there were some people who thought, oh my God, we have been in ashram only for 30, 40 years. Some have just come. So she says, what should be the true movement? She says at one level it is an accomplished fact. But before that, she says that I told you immediately that before the effects of the supramental manifestation become visible and tangible, perceptible to everybody, perhaps thousands of years may go by. What she's saying is that the most outward effects become perceptible, tangible to everybody. But then Mahakali changes into Maheshwari and Mahalakshmi, because that time person was asking, how can we profit? What are we going to see? But still, I suppose these ideas are disturbing for the human consciousness with its sense of its short duration and the kind of impatience it brings. So she says at one level, it is an accomplished fact. At another level, those who have a developed consciousness, the supermind is already realized somewhere in a domain of the subtle physical. It already exists there, visible, concrete, and expresses itself. And then she says one of the signs is that our dreams have changed. So we'll see many people become more and more conscious of their dreams. This itself is a sign that it is active. And then connected with this is a question about the thousands of years. So she says, I was announcing, some people, it seems, thought that I was announcing that the Superman will not come before another million years. I want to correct this impression. Actually, Superman came within 12-13 years, 69. So she says, Sri Aurobindo has said that as the development rises in the scale of consciousness, the movement becomes more and more rapid. And that when the spirit or the supermind intervenes, it can go much faster. Therefore, we may hope that in a few centuries, the first supramental race will appear. Now that answer was in response to somebody. That's why it's so important to rightly quote the context. Because somebody was asking, how can we profit? Why hasn't things changed? So she says that, where is the new race? Somebody had asked such a question. Where is the new race? So probably the person was in dense obscurity. She says it will wait for a few thousand years. Probably it was meant for that kind of a consciousness. But now she says, few centuries, we may hope that in a few centuries the first supramental race will appear. But even that is rather disconcerting for some people. For they think it contradicts what Sri Aurobindo has always promised, that the time has come for the supramental transformation to be possible. But we must not confuse a supramental transformation with the appearing of a new race. So there are three things now. Supramental manifestation, which has begun from 29th February 1956. Then there is the supramental transformation, which means individually, all around, people who are open and receptive, the transformation is going on. Already started, and it's going at different levels: mind, heart, speech, life, even in the physical. And new race means there is a sufficient number of collectivity, maybe 2,000, 50,000, we don't know. Distinctly, it's a different species. So she clarifies that the appearance of a new race, because the question of the person was, where is the new race? And not transformation. So these are the three things, and transformation, she has said, as we'll read subsequently in other volumes, that there will be many intermediary species. All these details of transformation she describes later on. So what Sri Aurobindo had promised was the universal manifestation of the supermind, which has taken place. This is a very interesting conversation. I'll not read it, but I have shared it sometimes. And I'll give the page number for those who want to read it. Page number 300. It's the conversation of 24th September 1956. And the question is, page 300, sorry. It's on page, okay. It's conversation of 19th September 1956. And the question asked is, because Mother said, look life in the face with the soul's strength, don't run away. So the question asked is, it is said that to become conscious of divine love, all other love has to be abandoned. What is the best way of rejecting the other love which clings so obstinately and does not easily leave us? Mother's answer, to go through it. To go through it. And she says, not just go through it. What she says very interestingly, to go through, to see what is behind it. Not to stop at the appearance, not to be satisfied with the outer form. People don't realize it. So sometimes they shut their eyes, ears and everything, and they isolate, go into a shell, and they feel they are purified. 20, 25-year-old person suddenly writes, but I am already purified. Why all these doubts and fears are coming in me? I said, it because you are not purified. Because you are not engaging in outer activities of a certain kind doesn't mean you are purified. They are all sitting inside. And they raise their heads, saying that, look, I am here. You can't. Because you have run away from outer life, they are showing up inside. So, she says, when you go through it, not to be satisfied with the outer form, to look for the principle which is behind the love, this love, and not be content until one has found the origin of the feeling in oneself. Then what do you discover? The divine love, which is in all things. That is the best way. And then she cautions. Some people will say, yeah, that is okay, she has given a concession, but actually still it is better not to get into it. So she says, to want to get rid of the one in order to find the other is very difficult, it is almost impossible. For human nature is so limited, so full of contradiction, and so exclusive in its movements, that if one wants to reject love in its lower form, that is to say, human love as human beings experience it, if one makes an inner effort to reject it, one usually rejects the entire capacity of feeling love and becomes like a stone. That happens to people who try doing it. And you wonder why such a person is stone-hearted. precisely because you have rejected. And then sometimes, he doesn't stop here, and then sometimes one has to wait for years or centuries before there is a reawakening in oneself of the capacity to receive and manifest love. So, love is a raw material. If it awakens, purify it. If you have thrown away the raw material, it is the power. You have thrown away the raw material. Then it's where will you get it? Then you have to wait for it to come through some other source. Therefore, the best way when love comes in whatever form, is to try and pierce through its outer appearance and find the divine principle. Naturally, it is full of snares and difficulties, but it is more effective. That is to say, instead of ceasing to love because one loves wrongly, one must cease to love wrongly and want to love well. How beautifully she has put it. Should cease to love wrongly. And then she gives instance that love between human beings in all forms, love of parents for children, of children for parents, of brothers and sisters, of friends and lovers, is all tainted with ignorance, selfishness, and all the other defects which one man's ordinary drawbacks. Oh, that person did this to me. Oh, that person behaved like this. So, you are doing sadhana or the other person is doing sadhana? So this is how the common refrain is. So instead of completely ceasing to love, which besides is very difficult, as Sri Aurobindo says, which would simply dry up the heart and serve no end, one must learn how to love better. Because if we take that route, then we are waiting for somebody to love you truly. That means we have become dependent. You learn to love truly. What is there? One must learn how to love better, to love with devotion, with self-giving, self-abnegation, and to struggle not against love itself, but against its distorted forms, against all forms of monopolizing, of attachment, possessiveness, jealousy, and all the feelings which accompany these main movements. Not to want to possess, to dominate, and not to want to impose one's wills, one's whims, one's desires, not to want to take, to receive, but to give. Not to insist on the other's response, but be content with one's own love. Not to seek one's personal interest and joy in the fulfillment of one's personal desire, but to be satisfied with the giving of one's love and affection. And not to ask for any response, simply to be happy to love, nothing more. And if you do that, you will take a great stride and you will touch the divine love which is in the depths. So the first step is to stop being selfish. For everyone it is the same thing. Not only for those who want to do yoga, but also in ordinary life. If one wants to know how to love, one must not love oneself first and above all selfishly. One must give oneself to the object of love without exacting anything in return. This discipline is elementary. Basics. And then she says, as for yoga, we may add something else. It is, as I said in the beginning, the will to pierce through this limited and human form of love and discover the principle of divine love which is behind it. This is better than drying up one's heart. You don't reject a person, you don't reject you. That's how yoga in life. So this is so beautiful, and I'll close with just one small little thing. So people often ask this question that, well, we are asked to choose, and we are asked to choose without preferences. So how can we choose? Because one always feels choice is about preferences. Choice means I prefer this, so I choose this. How can we choose without preferences? So mother gives, like to children, she's explaining. Actually, it is so evident. When it is said choice, it means choice in keeping in center your aspiration. If my aspiration to connect with the divine, then my choice should be what will lead me closer to the divine and what will veil the presence. It's as simple as that. But if we are still living in a world of preferences, so the mother says, choice means a decision and an action. Preference is a desire. A choice is made and ought to be made, and if it is truly a choice, it is made without care for the consequences, without expecting any result. Nishkam karma doesn't mean no choice. It means to choose wisely, rightly, and try to align your choices with the divine will. You choose. You choose according to your inner truth, your highest consciousness. Whatever happens does not touch you. Don't start ifs and buts. That this what I believe is the highest, but it's not practical, this may happen. No, that's not your concern. Yes, things may not happen according to anybody's expectation. For a yogin, there has to be no expectation. But the choice should be from your highest, not even the highest, your highest. Whatever happens does not touch you. You have made your choice, the true choice, and what comes about is not your concern. How people see you, rate you, announce or pronounce about you. While on the contrary, if you have preferences, you will choose through preference in one way or another. Your preference will distort your choice. It will be calculation, bargaining. Because you want something. You will act with the idea that a particular thing must happen because this is what you prefer. And not because that is the truth, the right thing to do. Preference is attached to the result, acts with a view to the result, wishes things to be in a particular way, and acts to bring about its wish, and so this opens the door to all kinds of things. Choice is independent of the result. Choice is something from within. That's what I keep saying, that Indian individuality, here also we believe that we should make choice. And Western idea of individuality, they are two different. People say no, in India there is no individuality. Not at all. In the Western context, individuality, at least today, it means I'll do what I feel like. Now, what I feel like is I am driven by my preferences, desires. That's my desire. I want to have it. What's your problem? So it's okay. That's one way to look. Indian individuality is based on intrinsic dharma. Is it the true thing? Is it the right things? Indians keep on, having this true Indian. They keep on, is it the right thing? Is it the true thing? It doesn't mean they have no individuality. But their individuality is centered around dharma, not around desires. So the choices are based on that. And certainly at every minute, I'm not saying everybody does it, and today's times everything has become a khichdi, but this is how it used to be. And certainly at every minute you can choose, you're faced with the necessity of choosing at every second. So, another confusion, that divine should treat everybody in the same way. This is something very interesting. As for treating everybody in the same way, it is a worse confusion still. It is a kind of confusion one makes when one says that the divine must treat everybody in the same way. So it would not be worth the trouble to have diversity in the world. Not worth the trouble of not having two identical individuals. For this contradicts the very principle of diversity. Different people are at different levels, stages, and even with us, we can't treat a 2-year-old child the same way as we treat a 5-year-old, not the 5-year-old the way we treat a 15-year-old, the 15-year-old the way we treat a 25-year-old, even though all of them be the child of the same parent. You'll treat them differently. So this idea that you must treat everybody in the same way, it contradicts the very principle of diversity. And those who try to do it, and there is an effort to do it now, in the name of equality, they finish diversity. Their effort is to finish diversity. And that's why they become very intolerant of anything save their own idea. And again, I come back again and again to the woke culture. That's what it wants. In the name of equality, it wants to finish diversity. It says, but its whole thing idea ultimately, if you go to the root of it, one country, the whole world should be one nation. One person should rule it. There should be one culture, which is no culture. Everybody is free to do whatever they feel like. So this is your culture. So then what happens? Then it doesn't fly. It's a disintegrating thing. It's not diversity. Diversity means when each one is living according to the truth of one's own being. But this, that everybody will live according to whatever they wish to, they can be man in the morning and woman in the evening, based on the fancies, then what you are doing, you are leading a society toward disintegration. It's not choice anymore, it's preference, it's desire. So this is how, and they clothe it in such a word that it looks like, oh, they're giving you freedom of choice. But they're actually letting you be driven by desire. And at the end, when you have only one world state, one ruler, imagine how horrifying it would be. For one good ruler, you have 100 waiting. They'll impose one culture. Ultimately, diversity will go away because it will be told that any culture which does not believe in this way of life is cancel. That's how the word cancel culture has come. If somebody does not believe in our ideology that you wear black socks in the one foot and white in the other, or red and green, then you are inferior. You're not allowed. Because certain things have been cancelled. They do this. They're already doing it. That certain aspect, for example, of Sanatan Dharma, they're cancelling it, showing it inferior. So such an ideology will eventually wipe out every other kind of culture and impose its own culture, which is no culture, where there is a free fall anarchy, anything and everything in the name of freedom. So we should be careful. Choice and preferences are two different things. And while all are equal deep in the deep essence of things, but in actual dealing with people, you can't treat everything as if it were the same. It is same in essence, but you have to understand the differences in manifestation. Jai Ma.